house on Ridgeline Drive in Greenwich, Connecticut, was the kind of house that looked like happiness from the outside. 4 bedrooms, 3-car garage, a backyard big enough to disappear in. The kitchen alone cost more than most people's first apartments, with white marble countertops that Claudia Reinhardt Whitfield had personally selected from a showroom in Milan and had shipped over, a detail she mentioned at every dinner party they hosted. Seth Whitfield I sat alone in that kitchen at 9:14 on a Tuesday night, still wearing his work shirt with the top 2 buttons undone. The bourbon in his glass had barely been touched. His phone buzzed quietly with emails he wasn't reading. On the counter beside him, his MacBook Pro sat open to a half-finished quarterly report for Whitfield Pharma, numbers that were, in his own private language, optimistically arranged. The television in the adjoining living room was on volume low. CNN. Nothing that required his attention. He was used to leaving it on for the noise, the way people leave lights on when they don't want to feel alone in a house that should feel like home but doesn't. He reached for his bourbon. Then the anchor's voice changed pitch, that subtle shift broadcasters use when the segment matters, and in what many are calling the most emotional moment of this year's National Healthcare Leadership Gala at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. The evening's highest honor has just been awarded. Seth says glass down. To Nora Calloway, Executive Director of the Bridge Light Foundation, whose 7 years of work has brought critical medical resources to over 2 million underserved Americans across 14 states. The camera cut to the stage, and Seth Whitfield stopped breathing. She was standing at the podium in a floor-length navy dress, not flashy, not designed to turn heads, but the kind of elegant that comes from a woman who has stopped trying to impress anyone and simply arrived. Her dark hair was swept back. She was not wearing the nervous smile he remembered. She was not looking at the crowd like she needed their approval. She looked like she owned the room. Nora Calloway, the anchor said again, warmly, a name that will be remembered. Seth's hand hit the bourbon glass. It tipped. He caught it. The amber liquid sloshed over his fingers and he didn't notice. 7 years. He had spent 7 years telling himself she was fine, that she had moved on, that whatever happened between them had resolved itself the way these things always do, quietly, completely, with no lasting damage to either party. The woman on that screen was not someone who had simply moved on. She had become something extraordinary, and somewhere in the deep, uncomfortable part of Seth Whitfield's chest, the part he had learned to keep quiet with the expensive bourbon and busier schedules, a crack split open. He stood up from the stool. He walked to the living room. He stood 3 feet from the television, watching her speak, watching her smile at the audience, watching her hold that award with both hands the way you hold something you earned through pain. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother, Patricia Whitfield. Do you see the news? Not a question. 2 words that carried the full weight of a woman who had built her son's life on controlled outcomes and was now watching one of her decisions walk across a nationally televised stage with an award in her hands. Seth did not reply. On screen, Nora leaned toward the microphone, and her voice, steady, warm, completely unbroken, filled the room. 7 years ago, I had nothing, no job, no safety net. I was afraid every single day. She paused. But someone once told me that fear only wins if you let it make your decisions. So I stopped letting it. The audience erupted in applause, sat down on the couch, slowly, the way a man sits when his legs have stopped cooperating. He had left her with nothing. He just hadn't known what nothing would eventually build. 7 years earlier, Nora Calloway was 26 years old and working double shifts at St. Catherine's Medical Center in Lower Manhattan. She wasn't saving lives in the dramatic way people imagine when they picture nurses. She was doing the quieter version of saving, the 3 a.m. vital checks, the hand holding when families were too frightened to say the right thing, the precise and careful work that required everything from her every single night. She was good at it. She was deeply, genuinely good at it. She had a studio apartment on the fourth floor of a walk-up in Astoria, Queens, with a window that looked out onto the elevated train tracks. The apartment was small enough that her dining table doubled as her desk, and her desk doubled as her laundry folding surface. But she had filled it with plants and secondhand books, and the particular kind of organized warmth that people create when they're building a life they actually believe in. She had met Seth Whitfield 18 months earlier at a fundraiser for a pediatric ward that St. Catherine's was trying to renovate. He had been there representing Whitfield Pharma in his father's absence, polished, attentive, funny in a way that surprised her, and genuinely interested in the work she described. At least, she believed it was genuine. For 18 months it was, or it appeared to be. They were careful with each other at first, then less careful, or then not careful at all. He drove her to the farmer's market on Saturdays. She kept a toothbrush at his apartment on Park Avenue. He told her things he said he didn't tell other people. She believed him, because people generally believe what they want to be true. She did not know Patricia Whitfield was watching the entire relationship with the cold, strategic attention of a woman who had already decided how it ended. She did not know that Patricia had run a quiet background check on her 3 weeks into the relationship. She did not know that Patricia considered a Queens-born nurse with no family connections and a student loan balance a liability, an obstacle to the marriage alliance Patricia had already arranged in her mind between Seth and Claudia Reinhardt, daughter of Arthur Reinhardt, whose pharmaceutical distribution network Patricia had been trying to absorb for a decade. Nora did not know any of this. What she knew on the morning she took the test in the single bathroom of her apartment in Astoria was that 2 lines had appeared, and that the feeling rising in her chest was complicated, but not unwelcome. She called Seth. He didn't answer. She texted. He didn't reply for 6 hours. When he finally called back, his voice sounded like someone else was in the room listening. "I need to see you," she said. "I can't tonight. There's a situation at work." "Seth, this is important. Can it wait until tomorrow?" It could not wait until tomorrow, but she said yes, because she was still, at that point, giving him the benefit of the doubt. She would stop giving anyone that particular benefit within the next 48 hours. They met at the coffee shop on 68th, and Lex, neutral ground his suggestion, which she understood only later as a choice that allowed him to leave easily. she told him. She watched his face do something she had never seen it do before. It went completely, carefully blank, not shocked, not scared, just managed, like a man running a calculation. How long have you known? He asked. 2 days. He nodded. Slow. The nod of a man buying time. Nora. He set both hands flat on the table, which she recognized later as the posture people assume when they're about to deliver something they've rehearsed. I need to be honest with you. She had thought he was going to say he was scored, that he needed time, that they would figure it out together. He said, my mother met with me this morning. There's a situation that I've known about for a while. There's someone, a business arrangement that's been building for a long time. It involves the company's future, my future. He paused. I can't walk away from it. The coffee shop was warm. A barista called out a name. Somewhere nearby, 2 women laughed. Nora did not move. Are you telling me, she said very quietly, that you're choosing a business arrangement over this? He did not say yes. He said, I'm telling you that some decisions were made before I was ready to be honest with myself about what I actually wanted, which was the same thing. She stood up. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She walked out of that coffee shop on 68th and Lex, and she stood on the sidewalk in the November cold, and she breathed in and out until she trusted her legs again. Her phone buzzed. A text from Seth. I'll make sure you're okay financially. My mother can arrange. She blocked his number. What she did not know, what she would not discover for another 4 years, was what Patricia Whitfield did next. Patricia Whitfield, who had been monitoring the situation with the efficiency of a woman who ran a billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire, called a doctor she knew, a doctor who owed the Whitfield family several favors. She gave him Nora's name and the name of Nora's OB. She did not ask him to do something cruel directly. She asked him to make a referral, to advise the patient that the pregnancy carries significant medical risks, to suggest strongly that termination was the medically recommended course. What Patricia did not account for was the doctor refusing. Dr. Raymond Foster, the very same Dr. Foster who would, years later, become Nora's mentor, received Patricia Whitfield's call, listened to her instructions, and then sat quietly for 60 seconds. Then he called Nora Calloway directly. He had never met her. He would introduce himself, he said, only as someone who wanted her to know that someone had tried to make a decision for her. She deserved to make it herself. That phone call changed everything. But Nora didn't know how much, not yet. The 3 months that followed Seth's exit were the hardest of Nora's life. She was evicted, not because she couldn't pay rent, but because her landlord, a man she later discovered had done business with Patricia Whitfield's property management arm, suddenly cited a lease violation. The violation was technically legitimate, technically discoverable, and Patricia's people had found it. She lost her position at St. Catherine's 3 weeks later. The hospital's board received an anonymous complaint about her patient interaction conduct. The complaint was vague, impossible to disprove cleanly, and just specific enough to create doubt. In a hospital where reputation was everything, doubt was enough. She had no savings, a child growing inside her, a reference pool suddenly made complicated by a HR process she didn't fully understand. She slept on a friend's couch for 6 weeks. She applied for 71 jobs. She was rejected from 43 of them and ghosted by the rest. She did not know why doors kept closing. She would not know fully for years. What she had was Dr. Foster, who had called her once as a stranger, and then, finding her in genuine crisis, had become something more. He connected her to a small community health clinic in the Bronx. He paid her first and last month's rent on a one-bedroom apartment in Washington Heights. As a loan, he insisted, with a paper record, because he said he did not give handouts. He gave investments. And on March 14th, at 6:43 in the morning, she gave birth to a boy. She named him Finn. He had Seth's dark hair and her own brown eyes and a particular quality of stillness when he slept that made her feel, for the first time in months, like everything was going to be survivable. She did not put Seth's name on the birth certificate, not because she was angry, though she was, not because she wanted to punish him, because she had made a decision in the cold clarity of new motherhood that her son would not be owned by a story that had not wanted him. He was Finn Calloway. He was hers, and she was going to build something for him, even if she had to build it with her bare hands from absolute zero. The Bridgelight Foundation did not begin as a foundation. It began as a spreadsheet. Nora, working nights at the community clinic and days applying for grants she mostly didn't get, had started tracking the gap between what underserved communities needed medically and what they actually received. She tracked it with the same precision she had used charting patient vitals, methodically, completely, with no room for the self-deception that made the problem easier to ignore. She sent the spreadsheet to Dr. Foster, who sent it to two colleagues who shared it at a public health conference in Baltimore. Someone at that conference sent it to a deputy at the Department of Health and Human Services. 18 months later, Nora had her first federal grant. 2 years after that, the Bridgelight Foundation was officially incorporated. 4 years after that, they had deployed mobile healthcare units across 14 states, established free telehealth access for over 800,000 households, and partnered with 43 hospital systems to place trained patient advocates inside emergency rooms in underserved zip codes. Nora ran it all from a converted warehouse office in Washington Heights that still smelled faintly of the paint they'd used when they renovated. Her desk faced the window. She had a framed photo of Finn on one side and a handwritten note from Dr. Foster on the other. Fear only wins if you let it make your decisions. She had not let it. She had also not dated anyone seriously, not because she was still thinking about Seth. She was not, most days, but because single motherhood and organizational leadership left exactly zero bandwidth for softness with strangers. There was one exception, but she did not know it yet. His name was Gabriel Cross, and for the past 4 years, he had been making sure certain doors stayed open for her without her knowledge. Gabriel Cross was a civil rights attorney based in D.C., known in legal circles for dismantling institutional discrimination cases with the particular patience of a man who was never in a hurry because he had always done his homework first. He had first encountered Nora's name in a legal filing, a wrongful termination complaint she had filed quietly against St. Catherine's that had been buried before it went anywhere. He had seen the complaint. He had also seen the evidence attached. He had done the math. And for 4 years, without ever introducing himself, Gabriel Cross had been a quiet hand behind certain decisions, a grant application that received a second look, a reference letter that carried more weight than it should have, a regulatory complaint against a competitor that cleared a path Bridge Light needed cleared. He was not doing it for anything in return. He was doing it because he had read her complaint and her spreadsheet and her grant applications, and he had concluded with the methodical certainty that made him excellent at his work that Nora Calloway was the kind of person the world tended to underestimate at great cost to itself. He wanted to be there when the cost was finally collected. He would be. But not yet. The National Healthcare Leadership Gala had been Dr. Foster's idea. He had nominated Nora without telling her. He submitted 46 pages of documentation to the selection committee, including financial audits, community impact reports, testimonials from 231 patients whose lives had materially changed because of Bridge Light's intervention. When the committee called Nora to inform her she had won the evening's highest honor, she sat in her Washington Heights office for a long moment, looking at the framed photo of Finn. He was 7 years old now. He had lost 2 teeth and gained a gap-toothed grin that killed her every time. He was in 2nd grade. He was obsessed with building things, Legos, cardboard structures, anything he could construct, and then rebuild better. She picked up the phone and called him at her neighbor's apartment where he was having dinner. Finn, something happened today. Good something or bad something? Good something. How good? She smiled. Really good, buddy. She could hear him processing this with a particular seriousness of a 7-year-old who had inherited his mother's way of needing to understand the full picture. Okay, he said finally. Can we celebrate with the good mac and cheese? Not the box kind. She laughed. The first real unguarded laugh she'd had in weeks. Yes, she said. We can celebrate with the good mac and cheese. The Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. was everything the name implied. Grand and serious and lit with the kind of light that makes history feel present. Nora arrived in a car Dr. Foster had arranged, wearing the navy dress her friend Becca had found at a boutique in Georgetown and insisted on, and carrying an inner state of mind she would later describe as terrified and weirdly calm at the same time. Dr. Foster met her in the lobby. He was 71 and had the posture of a man who had spent decades in rooms that expected him to stand straight. You look like a queen, he said. I look like someone who borrowed a dress, she said. He smiled. Sometimes that's the same thing. When her name was called, the room stood. Not politely, not perfunctorily. The room stood the way rooms stand when they have just understood something important. She walked to the stage. She took the award. She looked out at 600 people who were on their feet, and she thought, briefly, about a woman who had been evicted from her apartment, rejected from 43 jobs, and had sat in a one-bedroom in Washington Heights, eating takeout ramen at midnight while her infant son slept, wondering if she had made a mistake trying. She leaned into the microphone. 7 years ago, I had nothing, no job, no safety net. I was afraid every single day. She paused. But someone once told me that fear only wins if you let it make your decisions. So I stopped letting it. Somewhere in Greenwich, Connecticut, a man watched this and dropped his bourbon. Patricia Whitfield saw the broadcast at her estate in Darien, Connecticut, 72 minutes before Seth did. She had standing alerts set for certain names. Nora Calloway's name had been on that list for 7 years, not because Patricia thought she posed a risk, but because Patricia did not leave risks unmonitored. She watched the broadcast in her study, in the leather chair beside the fireplace, with the particular stillness of a woman who had spent 50 years turning problems into solutions. She saw the award. She saw the coverage. She saw the anchor, called Nora Calloway, a name that would be remembered. She picked up the phone and called her publicist. I need you to find anything, she said. Financial irregularities, conflicts of interest, anything in that foundation's documentation that creates doubt. Mrs. Whitfield, the foundation looks clean. They've been through. Everyone has something, Patricia said. Find it. She hung up and called the second number on her private list, a journalist, a man whose mortgage she had, through a series of arrangements that maintained plausible separation, effectively managed for the past several years, a man who had written several useful stories at useful times. I need a piece, she said. Bridgelight Foundation. Questions about the executive director. Grant sourcing. Whether her personal relationships influenced federal funding decisions. That's a serious allegation. It's a question, Patricia said. Questions don't require proof. What Patricia did not know, what she could not have calculated, was that Gabriel Cross had anticipated exactly this move. For 4 years, he had been watching Patricia Whitfield the way you watch an opponent in a long game, patiently, completely, without tipping your hand. He had documentation. He had the original recording of Patricia's call to the doctor she had contacted 7 years ago. He had financial records tying Patricia's property management LLC to Nora's former landlord. He had the testimony in sworn affidavit form of a former HR director at St. Catherine's who had been instructed to initiate the complaint process against Nora and had, years later, developed a conscience about it. He had been waiting for Patricia to make a move that was big enough to justify what he had prepared. She had just made it. He called Nora that night. It was the first time she had heard his voice. Nora was still in her hotel room in D.C., the Hay Adams, which Dr. Foster had insisted on, still in the navy dress, sitting on the edge of the bed with the award resting against the nightstand, when her phone rang from an unknown number. She answered because she had learned, after years of doing what she did, the unknown numbers sometimes mattered. Nora Calloway? The voice was calm and precise and unfamiliar. My name is Gabriel Cross. I'm a civil rights attorney in Washington, D.C. I understand this call is unexpected. I have information you need, and I also need to be honest with you about something I should have told you several years ago. She was quiet for a moment. You have 90 seconds to convince me to keep listening, she said. He didn't take 90 seconds. He took 45. He told her about Patricia's call to the doctor. He told her about the landlord. He told her about St. Catherine's. He told her he had evidence for all of it. Then he told her what Patricia had done tonight. The journalist, the questions, the incoming piece. Nora sat very still. How long have you known all of this? She asked. A pause. 4 years. Another pause. And you've been what? Watching? Waiting? Protecting as much as I could without your knowledge. Preserving the evidence. Waiting for a moment when the pattern was complete enough that we could do something decisive with it. He paused. I apologize for not coming to you sooner. I had reasons. I'm not sure all of them were right. She stared at the award against the nightstand. Why are you coming to me now? Because she moved tonight. And if we don't move faster, tomorrow morning, the story about your foundation won't be about the award. It'll be about questions. Nora set her jaw. What do you need from me? In the morning, Gabriel Cross arrived at the Hay Adams lobby wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather portfolio that was, she would later learn, the most dangerous document in any room it entered. He was tall, measured, and had the specific quality of stillness that she associated with people who had decided something important and were simply waiting to execute it. He extended his hand. She shook it. I've read everything you've built, he said. It's extraordinary work. She looked at him steadily. Tell me about the evidence, she said. He smiled slightly, opened the portfolio, and for the next 3 hours, they went to work. Seth Whitfield arrived at the Bridge Light Foundation's Washington Heights office on a Thursday morning, 11 days after the Kennedy Center broadcast. He had rehearsed what he would say. He had told himself it was about closure, about doing the right thing, finally, about being honest with the woman he had wronged. The Bridge Light office was not what he expected. It was not sleek or corporate, but it was clearly alive. The lobby had a mural on one wall painted by kids from a Harlem after-school program. The front desk was staffed by a young woman who asked his name with the polite, unhurried confidence of someone who understood that access to Nora Calloway was not automatic. I'm Seth Whitfield. She'll know who I am. The young woman did not react. I'll let her know you're here. He waited 12 minutes. He was not offered water. Nora appeared in the lobby doorway. She looked at him the way you look at something you once found painful and have since reclassified. Seth, not surprised, not moved, just present. I need to talk to you, he said. You have 10 minutes, she said. Come in. She did not close the office door. That was his first indication of how this would go. He sat across from her desk and looked at the framed photo of a child. Dark hair, gap-toothed grin, and something in his chest lurched. Who is that? My son. A silence that had 7 years of weight in it. Nora. You said you needed to talk, she said. So talk. He talked. He told her about the pharmaceutical data issue, a regulatory problem with one of Whitfield Pharma's clinical trials, inconsistencies in the results reporting that were, he said carefully, being reviewed internally. He told her that he understood she may have come across certain documentation through her health policy work. He told her that if such documentation existed, it would be in everyone's best interest. Stop, she said. He stopped. You came here to ask me to stay quiet. He exhaled. Nora, this isn't, I'm not threatening you. I'm asking you to. You drove to Washington Heights, she said, to ask the woman you abandoned when she was pregnant to protect your company. He flinched. I didn't know about. He gestured at the photo. There's a lot you didn't know, she said, because you chose not to. You made that choice 7 years ago, and you can't unmake it today by showing up with a business problem. Nora, his voice cracked, and she could see it was real. The crack was genuine. I was wrong. I know that. I've known it. I'm not just here for. Your 10 minutes are up, she said. She stood. She walked to the door. She held it open. If you're experiencing regulatory concerns at Whitfield Pharma, she said, with the precise calm of a woman who knew exactly what she was holding, I'd recommend speaking with an attorney. He walked out. She closed the door. She sat back down at her desk, put both hands flat on the surface, and breathed. Then she called Gabriel. He came, she said. I know, Gabriel said. I'm looking at the FDA filing right now. Seth didn't create the problem, but someone has been using his name on documents he may not have seen. A pause. His mother, Nora said. His mother, Gabriel confirmed. What broke Seth Whitfield was not the FDA investigation. It was the text message. He arrived home from Washington Heights to find Claudia in the kitchen, calm, composed, in the way she was always calm and composed, which he had spent 9 years reading as strength, and now suddenly needed to reread entirely. She was looking at her phone. She did not look up when he came in. She doesn't stay quiet, Claudia said. What? Nora Calloway. Claudia set the phone on the counter. You went to ask her to stay quiet, and she didn't agree to it. Seth went cold. How do you know I went to see her? Claudia finally looked at him. Because your mother told me you were going. She asked me to call certain contacts if the visit didn't go well. Pause. I made the calls this morning. The room tilted slightly. You, what calls? Claudia, what did my mother tell you? She was very still, and in that stillness, something he had spent 9 years not seeing became visible. Claudia Reinhardt Whitfield had not been a victim of his mother's management. She had been a partner in it. I knew, she said simply, about Nora, about the pregnancy, about what your mother did. You knew she tried to. I knew she handled it. Yes. Claudia. His voice was barely above a whisper. There is a child. I know. He could be mine. He's yours. She said it without emotion. The way you state a fact you have simply chosen to file under manageable. Your mother confirmed it. Years ago, she had someone verify. She picked up her phone again. It changes nothing about the arrangement. Seth stood in the kitchen of the house that cost what it cost, in the life that had been assembled for him by two women who had decided between themselves what the acceptable parameters were. His son, 7 years old, dark hair, a gap-toothed grin in a photo on a desk in Washington Heights. He sat down on the kitchen floor. Claudia stepped around him and walked upstairs. Nora had told Finn very little about his father. She had not lied. She had simply given him age-appropriate pieces of a complicated truth, that his father and she had cared about each other, but hadn't been able to build a life together, and that this was a grown-up thing that had nothing to do with how much Finn was loved. Finn had accepted this with the pragmatic grace of a child who has been raised by a woman who doesn't perform emotions she doesn't mean. But children hear things. On the Saturday after Seth's visit to her office, which Nora had told Finn nothing about, Finn came to breakfast and sat across from her with the particular expression she had learned to read as him having processed something overnight. "Mom," he said, pouring his cereal, "is my dad the one from the news?" She set down her coffee. "What news, buddy?" "The people at school. Marcus's mom said she saw something online about you and some medicine company man." He looked up at her. The gap-toothed grin was absent. He was entirely serious. "Is he my dad?" Nora looked at her son, 7 years old, building things, rebuilding them better. She thought about what Dr. Foster had said once about the difference between protecting a child and preparing one. "Yes," she said quietly, "he is." Finn looked at his cereal bowl for a long moment. Did he know about me? This was the question. This was the one that had weight. "I don't think he did," she said carefully. "I think people around him made that decision for him. But that doesn't mean—" "It's okay," Finn said. She blinked. He looked up. "I mean, it's not okay, but we're okay, right?" She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "Yeah, buddy," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of it for being steady. "We're okay." Finn nodded, went back to his cereal. "Okay," he said. "Can Gabrielle come to my Lego thing next Saturday?" Nora looked at her son, the 7-year-old who had inherited her practicality and was already, in his own way, building a new structure from the available materials. "I'll ask him," she said. She picked up her phone and texted Gabriel. He replied in 4 seconds. "I'll be there." She stared at those 3 words for longer than was probably necessary. The article ran on a Tuesday. It was published in a digital outlet with enough credibility to be picked up by aggregators. A piece framing questions about Bridgelight's federal grant relationships and suggesting that personal connections may have influenced funding decisions. It named no specific crime. It proved nothing. It was, as Patricia had instructed, entirely constructed of implications. By 9 a.m., Nora's phone was flooded. By 10 a.m., 3 board members of Bridgelight had called. By 10:15, Gabriel sent a single text. "Now." What Patricia had not accounted for was that Gabriel Cross had given the full evidence package, everything, all 4 years of documentation, to 2 journalists the night before the article ran, not to kill the story, to preload the correction. By noon on Tuesday, a piece ran in the Washington Post. It was not a piece about Nora Calloway's grant relationships. It was a piece about Patricia Whitfield. It detailed, with documentation, the following: Patricia's call to the physician, the eviction, and its connection to a Whitfield-linked LLC, the complaint at St. Catherine's, and the sworn affidavit from the HR director, and, most devastating, Whitfield Pharma's falsified clinical trial data, documents that showed Patricia, not Seth, had been the architect of the data manipulation, using Seth's credentials without his full knowledge to authorize filings she controlled. The Post piece ran alongside a statement from the FDA confirming an active investigation. By 2 p.m., Whitfield Pharma stock had dropped 11%. By 4 p.m., Patricia Whitfield's attorney called Gabriel Cross. Gabriel did not answer. He was at Nora's office, sitting across from her desk, watching her read the post piece with an expression he had never seen her wear before. Not triumph, exactly. Something more tired and more real than triumph. Is it enough? She asked. It's everything, he said. She set down her phone. She tried to take my pregnancy from me. Yes, she destroyed my job, my apartment, 7 years of closed doors. Yes, Nora looked out the window at the Washington Heights street below. A delivery truck, a kid on a bicycle, an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I want it on record, she said. Not for me, for the next woman she tries this with. It's already on record, Gabriel said. The affidavit is filed. The FDA is moving. And the journalist who ran the hit piece has already issued a correction and named his source. Patricia Whitfield's name was on everything, as it should have been from the beginning. Seth Whitfield called Nora on a Wednesday evening, 3 days after the Post piece ran. She answered. She didn't know why she answered. Maybe because she had already said the hard things in her office, and there was nothing left that could genuinely surprise her. I didn't know, he said. About your apartment, about the job, about... He stopped. I knew my mother was managing things. I let her manage things. I didn't ask questions, because asking questions meant seeing something I didn't want to see about myself. Nora was quiet. I found out about Finn from Claudia, he said. My mother told Claudia years ago. Claudia, she and my mother, had an arrangement I didn't know the full terms of. I know, Nora said. I paused. I want to meet him, Seth said. She had expected this. She had thought about what she would say. Seth, she was careful. He is a 7-year-old child who has never needed anything from you to be exactly who he is. He is healthy and loved and building Lego structures that are frankly more structurally sound than anything I could design. She paused. If you want to be part of his life, that is something we can talk about, very slowly, on his terms. Not yours, not mine, his. Yes, Seth said immediately. Whatever it takes. It won't be easy, and it won't be fast. And the first thing I need from you is a full cooperation statement to the FDA that exonerates you and places full accountability where it belongs. A pause. I already submitted it this morning, he said. Nora exhaled. Okay, she said. Nora, his voice broke slightly. I'm sorry. I know that means nothing after. It doesn't mean nothing, she said. It means something. It just doesn't mean everything. She paused. Good night, Seth. She hung up. She sat in the quiet of her apartment, Finn asleep in the next room, the award from the Kennedy Center on the bookshelf beside the books she had read during the 3 years she was building Bridge Light from a spreadsheet. She thought about the word nothing. She thought about what nothing had built. Patricia Whitfield was formally charged on a Friday in November. The charges were substantial: fraud, obstruction, and civil conspiracy. The last count related to her coordinated effort to blacklist Nora from her medical career using Patricia's business connections. She arrived at the federal courthouse in Darien in a black car, and the composed expression that she maintained for approximately 11 seconds before the cameras found her. She had spent 50 years being the woman in the room who could not be touched. She was now in a room that was entirely built for touching people exactly like her. Claudia Reinhardt Whitfield had filed for divorce the morning after the post piece ran. She moved with the swift precision of a woman who had been prepared, who had, in fact, always maintained her own financial footprint independent of the Whitfield family holdings, because Claudia had understood from the beginning that the arrangement had an expiration date. She took what the prenuptial agreement entitled her to and left. She had not loved Seth. She had occupied a role. She performed it adequately. She exited it efficiently. Seth was left in the Greenwich house, the 4-bedroom, 3-car garage house with the Milan marble countertops, alone. He sold it within 2 months. He moved to a smaller apartment in the city. He cooperated fully with the FDA investigation. He agreed to a significant personal financial settlement that restructured Whitfield Pharma under new independent oversight. He did not attempt to rebuild himself publicly. He did not give interviews. He did not have his publicist issue statements about his transformation. He showed up instead at a small park in Washington Heights on a Saturday afternoon in December because Nora had told him, after 4 weeks of careful conversation, that Finn had agreed to a meeting. Finn was 7, building something from sticks and a piece of rope he had found. He looked up when Seth arrived. He looked at him for a long moment with Nora's brown eyes and Seth's dark-haired face. "Hi," Finn said. "Hi," Seth said. He sat down in the grass near Finn's construction project without being invited, which was instinctively correct, not asking permission, not making it a production, just being present. "What are you building?" Seth asked. "A bridge," Finn said. "But the middle keeps falling." Seth looked at the structure. "The rope needs to anchor lower," he said. "See where it's tied. Move that down and it'll distribute the weight better." Finn considered this, retied the rope where Seth indicated. The middle held. Finn looked at it. Then he looked at Seth. "Okay," he said. "Just that. Okay." Nora, standing 10 feet away, turned her face toward the December sky and let herself quietly cry, not from sadness, from the specific relief of a woman who built everything on her own and can finally, after 7 years, afford to let something be okay. Gabrielle Cross asked Nora Calloway to dinner in January, 6 weeks after the park. He did it simply, no elaborate arrangement. He called her on a Tuesday afternoon and said, "I would like to take you to dinner, not as your attorney, as someone who has been hoping you'd have time for this for approximately 4 years." She was quiet for a moment. "You could have said something earlier," she said. "You were building something," he said. "I didn't want to be a distraction." "That's either very noble or very annoying," she said. "Probably both," he said. She said yes. They went to a restaurant in Georgetown that had been there for 30 years and knew how to leave people alone. They ordered wine she didn't know enough about to choose, and he didn't make her feel bad about not knowing. They talked about Finn's bridge and the FDA case and the bridge light expansion, and at some point the conversation moved to things that had nothing to do with any of it. A book she was reading, a neighborhood in D.C. he thought she'd like, the particular way January light hit the Potomac at 4 p.m. She looked at him across the table and thought about the person she had been 7 years ago, sitting in a coffee shop on 68th and legs, while her world rearranged itself without her permission. She thought about the woman who had blocked a number and walked out into November cold and decided to survive. She thought about the spreadsheet, the grants, the warehouse office, Finn's first steps, the night she sat in Washington Heights eating ramen at midnight and wondered if she had made a mistake trying. She thought about the Kennedy Center and 600 people standing up and the weight of an award in her hands. She looked at Gabriel Cross, who had spent 4 years quietly protecting what she was building because he understood, without being told, that it was worth protecting. You should have introduced yourself sooner, she said. You're right, he said. I should have. Don't make that mistake again. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that arrived without calculation. The genuine article. I won't, he said. In February, Nora signed the papers for Bridge Light's largest expansion to date, a federal partnership that would extend the foundation's mobile healthcare program to 6 additional states, adding approximately 400,000 households to the network. Dr. Foster attended the signing ceremony in a suite that Nora privately suspected he had owned since 1987 and was not going to change for any occasion short of his own funeral. He handed her the pen. She signed. He shook her hand and then, because he was 71 and had earned the right to do things his own way, he hugged her. I told you, he said quietly near her ear. Investment. She laughed. The unguarded laugh. Finn was there, sitting in the third row between Nora's friend Becca and Gabriel, wearing a clip-on tie he had insisted on, and immediately regretted for its strangling properties. He gave his mother a thumbs up when she looked over. She gave him one back. The ceremony ran 40 minutes. Afterward, there were photographs and handshakes, and a reception that Nora stayed at for exactly as long as was required before she collected Finn and Gabriel and drove back to Washington Heights. They made dinner, the good mac and cheese, the kind with real Gruyere and breadcrumbs on top, that took an hour and was completely worth it. Gabriel did the breadcrumbs. Finn supervised, which involved eating approximately 40% of the breadcrumbs before they made it to the pan. It was not a dramatic evening. It was, in the specific and underrated way that matters most, a good one. Gabriel asked her in the kitchen. This was not planned. He had intended to do it somewhere with better lighting, a more symbolic weight. But the moment arrived on a Wednesday night in March, while she was washing dishes, and Finn was asleep, and the apartment was quiet in the way it gets, quiet when everything that was supposed to happen has happened. He said, I need to ask you something. Turned off the water, turned around. He was holding a small box, not presenting it dramatically, just holding it the way you hold something that belongs to the person in front of you, and you're returning it. I am aware, he said, that you have built everything in your life on your own terms, and I have no interest in proposing an alteration to that, but I would like to be part of the structure, formally, with your permission. She looked at the box. She looked at him. Did you clear this with Finn? She asked. 2 weeks ago, he said. He negotiated for additional Lego budget as a condition of his blessing. I agreed. She laughed. The good laugh. The real one. Yes, she said. He opened the box. The ring was simple, clean, and elegant, and not designed to announce itself, which was exactly right. He put it on her finger. They stood in the kitchen for a while, not saying anything, because sometimes nothing you say is as accurate as just standing in a place you've built and acknowledging that you built it. Finn appeared in the doorway in his pajamas. Did you do it? He asked Gabriel. I did, Gabriel said. Finn looked at Nora's hand. Cool, he said. Can we get the good mac and cheese again tomorrow? Nora pulled him in and held him against her side. This boy who had come into the world during the worst year of her life and had somehow always known they were going to be okay. Yeah, she said. We can do the good mac and cheese. Spring came to Washington Heights the way it always does. Slowly, then suddenly, the trees deciding all at once that they've waited long enough. Nora walked to the Bridgelight office on a Thursday morning in April, the way she had walked to it every workday for years. The mural was still on the lobby wall. The front desk was still staffed with a young woman who understood that access was not automatic. The desk still faced the window. The photo of Finn was still on one side. The note from Dr. Foster was still on the other. Fear only wins if you let it make your decisions. But there was now a third thing on the desk, the award from the Kennedy Center. She sat down. She opened her laptop. She started the morning the way she always started it, with the numbers, the gap between what people needed and what they received, the relentless arithmetic of trying to close that gap. She had, that morning, a meeting with a senator's office about the next expansion phase. She had a call with 3 hospital systems about a new patient advocacy pilot. She had a standing 9 a.m. check-in with her team, who were now 23 people in a warehouse office that smelled less like paint and more like the life she had built inside it. Patricia Whitfield was awaiting trial. The date had been set. Seth was in individual therapy and seeing Finn once a week, not dramatically, not as a production, but carefully, the way you tend something fragile that you hope, given enough time and care, becomes sturdy. Gabriel was in the next room on a call, his voice low and certain. Finn had that morning rebuilt his rope bridge in the living room with a new engineering modification that had reportedly solved the middle collapse problem for good. Nora looked at the award. She thought about the woman who had stood on that stage and said that fear only wins if you let it make your decisions. She had not been performing a line. She had been reporting a fact, the most important fact she had learned in 7 years of building something from nothing, in a life that had been taken apart by people who thought she could be contained. You cannot contain someone who has already decided to build. You can take their apartment. You can take their job. You can take their safety net and their references and their sense of how the next year is supposed to go. But if they decide, if they make that single, unremarkable, world-altering decision to keep going anyway, you cannot take what they will become. Nora Calloway opened the morning's first file. She got to work. So, the story is over now. And if you've made it all the way here, if you're genuinely still with us at this point, then something in this story touched you. Maybe it wasn't the awards or the courtroom or the moment Seth saw her face on the TV screen. Maybe it was something quieter. A woman eating ramen at midnight alone, wondering if she made a mistake by choosing to keep going. Here's what I want to sit with you in for just a moment. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, people who lived through real loss, real betrayal, real powerlessness, they kept coming back to one idea. You cannot always control what happens to you, but you will always own how you respond to it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Nora didn't win because the world became fair. She won because she refused to let unfairness write the ending. And here's the thing I truly believe that applies to you too. Whatever door closed on you, whatever person walked out, whatever year felt like nothing was working, you are not behind. You are building. If this story meant something to you today, please hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so we can keep walking through stories and a life together. You're not alone. You never were. Just a quick note for everyone still with us. This entire story is a work of fiction created purely for entertainment and emotional reflection. The characters, events, organizations, and situations you just experienced are completely fictional and are not based on any real individuals, companies, or actual events. Nora Calloway, Seth Whitfield, Patricia Whitfield, Gabriel Cross, Finn, Dr. Foster, the Bridge Light Foundation, and Whitfield Pharma do not exist in real life. Everything was crafted to explore themes of resilience, betrayal, healing, and the quiet courage it takes to rebuild after loss. Any resemblance to real people, real organizations, or real circumstances is entirely coincidental. The pharmaceutical and legal elements depicted are dramatized for storytelling purposes and should not be taken as factual representations of real industry practices or legal proceedings. This narrative is meant to inspire reflection and emotional connection, not to represent or accuse any real-world party. Thank you for watching with an open heart and for understanding the creative nature of this content. We truly appreciate you being here.